Welcome, everyone, to another special episode of Search Off the Record podcast. Our plan with this series is to talk a bit about what's happening at Google Search, how things work behind the scenes, and who knows, maybe have some fun along the way. This episode is a bit special, so you'll soon find out more. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate on the search relations team here at Google in Switzerland. I'm joined for this episode by Martin and Gary, who are also on the search relations team. And we have a special guest today, Daniel.
Yay, Daniel. Woo.
Oh, yeah.
Yay. So good to have you on the podcast. Daniel, for those who don't know you yet, would you be so kind and tell us what you are doing on the Search Central team and who you're working with?
Of course. But first of all, I want to say that every time that there is a new episode of the podcast, I'll wait all the day until after work, I'll pour myself a glass of wine and I'll listen to it very carefully to learn a lot from you guys. So thank you very much for the podcast. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. So cool to hear.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah. So I joined Google about 8 years ago. I was part of the Google Analytics team for 6 years as an analytics advocate. And so doing stuff related to data analysis, best practices, and data visualization, and how to use data in a way that can make your business succeed. So this kind of stuff, and doing presentations as we do in our team, and writing stuff and working with the engineering team to make our products better. So I joined the search relations team about 2 years ago, and it's actually a funny story that I found this position playing ping pong.
What?
So I was looking for a new challenge. And I was playing with someone from the developer relations team. So I actually like playing ping pong. And I was telling him the story and he was like, you should talk to John. Do you know John? And I'm like, well, I've heard about John. So I reached out to John and we had a really nice chat. And he put me in contact with the Search Console team and we had a really nice chat. And because the Search Console team is based in Israel, it also made a lot of sense to have someone that, speaks Hebrew and could relocate back to Israel. And I've been in the team since then. I'm kind of embedded in the Search Console team in a way. So I work a lot with the engineers but also with the search relations teams. And it's a great place to be. I'm really enjoying the ride.
Woo! And we enjoy that you are here. It's so cool that you work with the Search Console team because I think a lot of stuff has happened and is happening in the Search Console product space. Is there anything from the bunch of recent announcements and releases that you would like to highlight?
So one of the recent launches that I was really excited about, and also because it came mainly from the users, it was a top request for a while, is we added the regex features to the performance report.
Regex?
And regex.
Regex. Okay. Got it.
Regex. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So regex. So performance report. So basically this feature, just to explain to those that didn't see it, is a new capability to perform more advanced features using regular expressions. And it landed really well. So people are really happy because, it was a top user request and they've been asking. And I think that really shows how we are kind of trying to developing new features and, listening to what people have to say and developing new capabilities that help people perform their jobs.
That's interesting. So you said that this feature is what you would consider a small feature, but has big impact, and that it was picked because it was the most requested by users. So how would I, as a Search Console user, request a feature then?
So there are a few ways that we try to kick off new features. And of course, users. So when we know that users need a feature to do their jobs, we try to make it happen. So it could be either through Twitter, we are over there and we're hearing what our users have to say. It could be the user feedback button on Search Console, and it could also be, for example, the search community, the forums, where we're always also monitoring and trying to see what people are asking and what kind of problems they're seeing as well. So that's one way. That's how users can influence the tool. And apart from that, we also, of course, get requests from up above, from our leadership. And sometimes they have ideas. They want to cross-functional features, things like that. And we try to do our best to incorporate those features into Search Console. But also, I see a lot, and usually I'm very excited about those features. Our engineers find ways to make it either more accurate or more interesting or more user-friendly, and they kind of bring new ideas and make them happen. One example, also a very small addition, which I think was really cool, is that on the tables on Search Console, you have all kinds of icons besides the pages, and there is one to copy the URL. And this is a feature that one of our engineers, every time that he was checking something, he had to copy the URL, and it really annoyed him. So he just built a feature, and it's super cool because it's really, really helpful. And so I think it shows one of those examples. So basically, again, 3 ways to start a new feature. One of them is through user feedback, through leadership requests, and also our engineers' initiative.
That's really cool. That's nice. And I guess we have lots of cool other things coming up in the future. And I'm really looking forward to see where we are taking Search Console.
Some of the things that I'm really excited about, and I think that we'll have more stuff coming up. So my background is in data and analytics, and obviously I'm biased towards data. And how can we make more data available in a better way? And so that's one of the things that I'm very excited about, how we can make more data available to users so that they can build their own solutions, so that they can innovate with our data. And I think that would be super cool.
That is super cool indeed, yeah.
So you're kind of saying analytics is helping Search Console.
Did I?
So we use analytics in search.
Was it? No, we don't. We don't use analytics in search. That's the first thing that I learned in the team, John, from you. You said we don't use analytics in search.
That's true. So. Cool. I love seeing all of the new stuff that the Search Console team is bringing out. And I really like also that mix of some things coming from users, some things coming from the team, and some things coming from leadership, where you can really tell that the people who are involved are passionate about the project. And I think it would be kind of awkward if we didn't have people from leadership saying, oh, you should do this because this is fantastic. Because if they come with these kind of requests, that means they're aware of the product, they know where it fits in, and they can connect the other products around Google to kind of make sure that Search Console plays a good role in the whole ecosystem. So I think that's all pretty cool. One of the things that I've been working on the side in my own time is trying to figure out a solution for my blog, where when I look at it, I think I last published something almost 10 years ago. So it's almost like a static site. And I keep having to update the CMS all the time. So that's one of those things where I'm like, I need to find a better way to deal with all of this. I don't know, Martin, how do you deal with your CMS? Or do you still use your own?
Oh, so I have long stopped using my own CMS. And I have to admit that I have kind of long stopped using CMSs at all, because most of the things that I build on the site are actually just static websites where I control the content and there isn't that much interactivity on it. So I usually use a static site generator. For the sake of simplicity, I usually use Yugo, but I know there's so many others. There's Eleventy, and I don't know, there's so many different static site generators that are fantastic. And then you don't have all of these weird issues with having to update things and installing security patches, because you basically just serve static HTML files.
Wow, what a coincidence. I don't know. I also just started using Hugo.
Oh! Oh, look at that.
Wow. Okay. I didn't even realize. I don't know. I didn't even check. But it's one of those things where I thought like, well, my blog is mostly static anyway. I might as well make it completely static. So I looked around for different static site generators to move to something like a more, I don't know, static HTML setup. And I ended up with Hugo, which uses Markdown pretty much for the content. So you just create text files and then you run some script and it generates a website for you. So I thought that was pretty cool. Kind of surprising to see, like, independently we came to a similar solution. So cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where in the beginning, I thought, well, I'll just use a static site generator because it'll be easier and it'll be completely hassle-free because, like, what is easier than creating an HTML page? But there's just so much involved. I ended up spending so much time digging into all of the different settings and, I don't know, tweaking the themes and setting things up so that they actually work. I'm like, at this time, I could have, I don't know, written something like WordPress on my own pretty much. There's just so much involved. But I really enjoy making pages again, which is kind of weird. And I ended up writing a whole bunch of blog posts that are not published because, of course, my site is not actually live yet, which is kind of awkward because I kind of switched to the static site generator because my site is static. And then because of that, I ended up making my site a little bit more dynamic. So everything is kind of weird in that regard.
Irony is everywhere, but holy moly, themes. Themes are so tricky to pick. How did you decide which theme you go with?
I just clicked on some random ones and it's like, oh, this one is pretty simple looking. I'll just use this one. I mean, the thing is, once you start tweaking the theme yourself, you're pretty much committed. You can't just like tweak around and then switch to something different again. So
that's true.
Yeah, that was kind of tricky. And then trying to implement all of the things that I kind of wanted to have, that took a little bit of figuring out how all of these different aspects of the static site generator work together. So one simple example is I wanted to have no-follow links or have it so that I can put no-follow links somewhere. And in Markdown, there's no notion of no-follow links. So essentially, I could just say, well, I don't care about no-follow links. It's like, what is Google going to do? Penalize my blog? It's like, we will see. But I figured out some options and I can make no-follow links now. So if you want to sell links on your site, Martin, with no follow, of course, then I can help you out there.
Nah, thanks. I'm good. I think I'm okay.
Oh, well. Okay. And the other thing that took a while to figure out is everything around redirects, where once you have everything in static HTML, you essentially have to use JavaScript redirects to make all of that work. And I don't know, that was a little bit of a hurdle because I was like, oh, static site generator makes clean HTML and then everything for search will just work. And then it's like, well, actually redirects you have to do with JavaScript. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I've created this weird mix of JavaScript and static HTML site, which is probably like every website out there, I guess. But I don't know. You end up running into these things. How do you see JavaScript working out nowadays, Martin? Should I be worried?
No, you don't have to be worried about that. I actually have a question for Gary, I think, because I was wondering, like, static HTML sites generated by a static site generator probably have two ways of making redirects if you don't consider the server being an option. One way is the JavaScript redirect, and you can potentially also have like a meta refresh tag on the page. But Gary, how do we treat meta refresh tags? Is that a good thing or should we avoid them?
So when we were creating the redirects for the blog, for the Webmasters blog to the Search Central blog, then my preference would have been the meta redirect because that we can understand without executing any JavaScript.
Right.
But failing that, JavaScript should work TM.
Love it. A question that I often also get with JavaScript is like if we treat JavaScript content differently. And I mean, we do have annotations for content, like what we think is the centerpiece of an article or what we think is like content on the side and stuff. But as far as I know and as far as I can see, we crawl a page and then put the content into the document in our index and then We render the page and then we complete the content from the DOM, and then that's it. Like, there's nothing that is fundamentally different between JavaScript generated content and static content, except for when there's edge cases and we can't see content that is generated by JavaScript. And I think links, right? Links are also immediately extracted from the crawled HTML, and then we do that again when we have the rendered HTML. I think there's like a logic that gets us link discovery as early as possible in the process too. But besides that, I think the content is pretty much treated the same way. So you should not be too worried about JavaScript, John.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, like, first I have to get my site finished anyway, so we will see. And maybe it'll be penalized by Google anyway because of my bad nofollow links. So we'll see.
Oh, you just reminded me. I need to actually verify. So I with a friend, I founded a foundation to foster first aid training in Switzerland, and I made a website for that, and I don't have a Google Search Console account for it yet. I should probably get that.
No!
Martin!
No!
I just set up analytics, Daniel. Calm down.
No!
Come on!
I put my static site on Google Cloud, and in order to do that, you verify the domain.
Ooh.
And because of that, it's like automatically in Search Console. It's so fantastic.
Oh, that's actually nice.
Yeah, #1 ranking guaranteed. I mean,
Oh, no.
I still don't know which keywords, but like I'm sure it'll be somewhere.
How to hack FTP.
Oh my gosh. All of those old blog posts, I went through all of those and it was like, should I just delete everything that's older than like 10 years? And I ended up going the other way, and I found some other old sites of mine that I had, and I put all of that content in there as well. So it'll be like a time warp.
Wow. It's like your own version of the Internet Archive.
I was surprised that I found all of this stuff, and like they were weird CMSs, but I don't know, the MySQL dumps I still had there, and I was able to pull it out of there directly. So it's super crazy.
Oh, I thought you were like Googling for it and finding it, which would hint at how well optimized your stuff was for Google search.
I mean, the domains that I had back then, they're like mostly expired. So it's like, it's gone. I mean, it's probably in the Internet Archive somewhere, but oh well. And I thought like all of this stuff is like super embarrassing, like old test sites where I realized that actually having a link to a page helps to get it indexed. And I was like, at the time, that was pretty mind-blowing. But nowadays, I'm like, well, I mean, like people have to learn somehow, right? So I figure I might as well put all of this old stuff online as well and show people that it's like you can do weird stuff and have, I don't know, strange questions and try to figure it out on your own and still, I don't know, make it somewhere. So at least I made it to a podcast.
Yeah. No, I also think like an iterative process is a good idea. Like I literally was like, okay, so I know that there's people who want to book the courses and I need to have like the booking system and stuff online. So I basically just built a first version of it. If you look at the copy, it is definitely not great. I'll get someone to write proper copy for it to actually optimize it properly. But the first version, I'm not sharing that anywhere because I know that people will be like, oh, look at this, how badly done this is. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It currently serves our goal, and that's what it needs to do. And if you had a question and you found out the answer and then you publish something about it, that serves its own goal. So that's fine. I think that's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah. I think we're kind of probably the exceptions when you look online because we're like, oh, we don't care if we get a lot of traffic or not. And the other people that we talk to, of course, because they come to us with SEO questions are like, how do I get as much traffic as possible?
Yeah.
And I think interesting for us to try things out and to get some hands-on experience with these kind of sites. But the background is kind of still different. We kind of have to, I think, keep that in mind too.
Do you know, John, that the first fondue that I made that was based on a recipe that you put up on Google Frugal?
Oh my gosh.
Or whatever its name was.
Google Base, right?
Or Google Base, yes. And I actually found that recipe without looking. Well, actually, I didn't even know who you are. Like, I didn't know that there's a John Mueller who works at Google. Or maybe he wasn't even working at Google at that point. I don't know. And I found this recipe on apparently Google Base. and I made it, and it was great. And when I actually moved to Switzerland, then I was looking for that recipe and you couldn't find it anymore. And it was very sad.
Oh.
Yeah. I think Google Base moved on to something else. What did it end up being? Is that like shopping, I think? Probably shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to dig up that recipe and put it on my site too, just for old time's sake.
Sounded like you were saying like it moved on to greener pastures.
Well, it kind of did.
Very indirectly.
Uh-huh. Oh my God.
So, Gary, tell us a bit more about what's happening in search. We've been kind of like following along with all of these cool stories around indexing and serving. Like, what's the next step? What are we missing?
So in one of the last episodes, we talked about serving a little bit, and we had a very high-level overview of what's happening there. And maybe we should start taking it apart and focus on the different components that we have in serving that make the magic happen. And one of the first things that are interesting enough that I think we should talk about is query parsing and query understanding. Of course, before that, there's other systems like the load balancer and whatnot, but I don't think that they are all that interesting from our perspective because they are just network components that route the traffic and try their best to prevent DDoS attacks. So let's talk about query parsing. And I know for certain that there is a video from Paul Haar from a Webmaster Conference in Mountain View where he talks a little bit about query parsing and understanding, but he covers two of the bigger elements of query parsing and understanding, but there are other elements or other aspects to it that are also very interesting and externally very visible. So when we query our index, then before we can actually send the query to the index, we have to transform it into something that our index will actually understand. And that would be the parsed query. And the parsed query compared to the user's query, at least in most cases, is an absolute monstrosity. Basically, if you search for something like purchase auto or purchase car, for example, that becomes a massive protocol buffer. Look it up on your favorite search engine. It's open source. But it becomes this massive protocol buffer with many, 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 many words. And that's essentially what query understanding and parsing does. Expanding the query into something that will not only return the results that are relevant for that query, that exact query that the user searched for, but also very closely related queries. And sometimes it also makes mistakes that you can see in the video that we probably will link to in our description. So query parsing. First, you have to decide what to do with a query, right? Like if you have purchase car, for example, then there's not all that much to parse about that. There's two words and you probably want to synonymize them, but otherwise it's fairly straightforward what to do with it. But if you have stuff like the Lord of the Rings, for example, then that's a more complex query and you have to decide what to do with that string. Do you treat each word separately, or you treat the whole thing as basically a compound and as essentially an entity on itself? Then there are other languages besides English. I know this is a shocker. And some languages don't have spaces in them, for example, or traditionally don't have spaces in them. And then you have to decide where to insert spaces. This is especially important for languages like Thai, where a sentence, a string can go on and on and on and on and on. And if you translate it, then there would be multiple sentences in that one string, because they seldom use punctuation for reasons. I don't know why. Chinese, for example, that's also a good example for lack of space and punctuation. And that's just how the language is. There's nothing wrong with it. Users of those languages can understand them, but for machines, it's more complicated. So we have a system called a segmenter that will try to split up the strings that the users supply to us and basically create words that we can look up in our index. Now that we have our parsed, I guess, user query, we move on to understanding. And in this phase, we do a lot of magic. One would be synonyms, for example, and also anti-synonyms, I guess. If you search for purchase car, then you would also expand that, or we would also expand that query to, let's say, purchase auto or buy car, or I forgot what the last one is, but you get the point. Then we would also inject in the parsed query the plural forms of the noun, I guess, in this case. So it would be purchase cars. And then we do other things. I forgot to mention anti-synonyms. This is Paul Har's example where this was back in 2005, I think, 2004, 2005, where we learned for some reason, automatically, our synonym system learned that United, the airlines, is a synonym of Continental Airlines, which was pretty bad. And of course, I mean, if you know about airlines history, then you know that later they merged.
We knew it.
Which was great, but it was several years later. And Paul said that he hopes that it wasn't our fault that they merged. We don't know. What else do we do? So yeah, in that case, we want to break that. Basically, we don't want to associate United, for example, with Continental Airlines. What else do we do? Stop words. We have to remove stop words. If you think about it, the internet is full of words like of, the, a, and in most cases, you don't need those words in the query. You don't have to search for them because, well, they are just not relevant. So you can safely drop them most of the time, because there are cases where you can't actually drop them. Like The Lord of the Rings, there you actually need all of them to understand the query and to detect the entity. What else would you add if you designed a query parsing system?
Do we do the same thing with understanding the content on the page as well? Or are these kind of different systems that evolve in parallel?
They are different systems. So when we parse a page, then we just tokenize it. Basically, we do the splitting if the language needs it, but otherwise we just, put everything in the index that we find on the page.
Okay. So like synonyms, it's not that we would store the synonyms with the index. We would pick them up when someone searches for them.
That's right. So for example, when I search for purchase car, for example, then if martinsplit.de has a page for that or a page for purchase auto, then we would pick potentially that page if it doesn't suck and would return it because we expanded the query to purchase auto as well. So basically the query would become purchase car or auto.
Okay, cool. Would we also try to understand the language of the query, or is that something where we basically say if the words are on the page, then the language is probably okay?
So the language that becomes more interesting in a lower level, but usually we pick up the language from the browser. Usually. It's not always. Basically, if the browser sends accept language header, for example, then we would pick that up and use that. Or if you set your Google search language to, I don't know, Thai, for example, then we would detect that and use that. Unless it's obvious that you are not searching in that language. Like, for example, if your browser is set to Japanese and you are using Latin characters searching for banana, then it's more likely that you want English results.
So cool. So many things are happening in search and essentially all hidden behind that tiny text box. It's so pretty cool.
Wait. You are not off the hook yet.
Oh, no.
Like there are way more things that happen in query parsing and understanding.
Oh my gosh.
There's stemming, for example.
I knew it.
Okay. Tell us more.
Where you search for auto trading. What do you do with trading?
Mm-hmm.
You have to do something with trading because you want to expand that word to other words. What do you do with it?
You need to find the base form, the infinitive, kind of.
Yeah. That's stemming.
Yeah.
Basically, it becomes auto-trading or trade.
So is that something where we have a team of linguists that put together a big spreadsheet with all of the different versions of the words? Or how does that happen?
Great question, but no.
No linguists.
This is learned automatically from the web corpora. So basically, we have all the words on the internet. Well, not all the words, but a large portion of the words of the internet. And we learn from there. We learn how to spell things and how to do spelling correction, for example. And sometimes that also does funny things to our spell correction system where we say that, no, you spell this wrong. And you are like, dude, I learned this when I was 2 years old. I know that this is how it's spelled. And Google insists that you spelled it wrong. Anyway. What else do we do?
Also, you said we remove stop words like a and the and stuff. But what if a stop word is important? For instance, if I search for The Rock, I probably mean The Rock.
Well, then we don't remove it.
Yeah, okay. So we put them in we leave them in when we think it's important. How do we know when it's important?
So there's a concept detection going on, and we try to match the query against concepts that we learned from the internet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then if it matches a concept, then it's likely that it could be that. But of course, context also matters. And The Rock might mean something different in different cultures or countries. Like if you go to the US or Hawaii, then The Rock, that is a completely different thing, as in entity, than searching for the same thing in Malta.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, yes, like we match it against concepts. And if there is a concept, then we will keep the
stop word
there.
Okay.
So we would take into account the user's location when it comes to understanding which words.
We add it as a context. Yes.
So cool. Okay.
So that's important when people search for, I don't know what the good example is, do groceries. That's a predominantly American thing to say. And in the UK, they would say differently. In Australia, they would say differently. So that's why you need a context.
So cool. I guess we also use that for understanding when things are more local. Like if you're searching for pizza, like probably web search will try to say, oh, well, John does not want a random blog with a pizza recipe.
That gets way more complicated because there we will have the, whatever we call it, I don't remember what we call it, the externally it's called the map pack. That will pop up. And to that thing, we will just pass on the parsed query plus the location that was detected in a separate thread. And we will try to give something for the user that is very close to their location. But that is unrelated to what we have in the parsed query.
Mm-hmm. What about numbers? I think we also might want to have a thing that if I type the numeric words like 200 or 574 or 523, which is particularly tricky because Germans would flip the digits so that we understand that it's a numeric quantity. And would the parser also rewrite that to an actual numeric?
I actually don't know. Try it. I would expect that at least in English, it would just match up against synonyms. But I don't know how it would work in weird languages like Hungarian and German. And
interesting.
Is this also where we pick up things like the umlauts, where in German you have those dots on the U, for example, and you can also write them as UE, like my last name, like Mueller. Like theoretically, I have this umlaut thing on my U, and to keep it simple, I just use the English version, which is UE. Would we just see those as synonyms and learn that over time?
That is a great question, and you will get a COVID cookie for that, because now I have lots of cookie recipes. That is something called diacritical expansion, and we will try to expand the query with the different ways people might write those funny characters. So, like, for example, the O with 2 dots that appears in many languages, Hungarian, German, Schweizerdeutsch, Finnish, Dansk, I think. What else? That might be it, actually. That also becomes O just simple O, like what you do with your name, or OE, which is the more traditional way to express those umlaut characters. Basically, we call umlaut character any character that has 2 dots on it. But they would essentially become synonyms in the parse query.
So cool. Yeah. Most of the time that works. The results are slightly different, but I imagine that's just because the parse query is like slightly different in the end.
That is another excellent point for another COVID cookie. So all the synonyms that we add will have a weight. So basically your original query, I don't know, Milling John, will have a weight of 1. Basically, as you wrote those words, they will count in full weight. Any synonym that we add will have a lower weight. And the less confident we are in the synonym, the less weight it will have. So basically, if you searched for Milling John, then that would be the 100% weight. But if we add to that a synonym, let's say grinding John,
okay,
then that will have much less weight.
Of course, yeah. It will just grind off the weight. I see. It makes very much sense.
I mean, in German, it kind of does.
Oh my gosh. Thanks a lot. Super insightful stuff. It's like, I always find it fascinating with these things where I'm like, oh, I know how this works more or less. And then I say something and you're like, well, actually, it's very different. So that's always cool. Anyway, so slowly things are opening up around here. How do you all feel about making it back to the office at some point?
No.
No?
No. Why no?
Look around. It's dark. It's warm. I'm alone. It's great.
But what about the kale, Gary? You're missing kale.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a great thing.
But what about your tiny sofa?
Oh, I threw it out.
You did?
Actually, I didn't. I just left it on the desk.
Good.
What about eating?
Oh.
2 meals a day.
Oh, that's cute.
Gary cooks so damn well. By the way, I should probably pop by at some point again.
Well, you're always welcome. You can just pop over and...
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. We are back to the office in Tel Aviv.
What?
So,
wow.
A few days a week or what?
Well, in theory, we are 50% back, but the 50% is not calculated per person. It's calculated per office.
Oh.
Which means that some people, well, there are still people that they don't want to come at all. So in the end, you can come more or less every day. You just have to book before. And well, the restaurants, they're back. And the Tel Aviv Google office has a very nice food, which I haven't eaten for a long time. And
I want to come.
I didn't get even one COVID cookie from Gary. So I'm still, maybe because I didn't answer any right questions.
Well, or, maybe because you're in Israel.
Maybe.
But that cafes that we have in the Tel Aviv office, that is in my top 3.
Yeah.
Very great.
Basically, it's like Tokyo office and Tel Aviv office, they are like competing for the first spot.
Yeah.
So you would go back to the office if you could go back to Tel Aviv?
I would probably want to go to Tel Aviv just to eat. The food is so amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think even more than the food, like being back to the office, I think over the last few weeks, since we started like coming back more often, it's been really nice. I think what changes it is that there is a certain threshold that it's becoming really interesting, and it really helps also when it comes to work. So what I'm trying to say is that people, there are many people in the team that, I used to have a day-to-day interaction, and we would sometimes eat together lunch or go for a walk in the middle of the day, or just, meet in the micro kitchen, and I would hear about new projects in the team and what's going on. And this kind of stuff, I think, at least, or maybe it's me, but I didn't keep this kind of social interaction with people that are not really good friends. Like I have some good friends in the team that we kept, in touch and meeting during the last year. But I think now that we have more people back to the office, I can see how like having like an office and a micro kitchen and like how it encourages creativity and, you know, interaction between people. And so I think that part is really nice, and I'm really happy to be back partially for now, but I think I'll also come back fully when everything opens as normal.
Yeah, I really kind of miss those social interactions where you just see different faces during the day. I'm kind of curious to see how it'll end up where it's like you've been working at home for such a long time and then kind of suddenly transitioning back to having to interact with real people and not just like being in front of your own computer kind of thing. But
John, usually we were standing at our desks with our headphones on. What are you talking about?
What?
That's not true, Gary. Come on. Like, sometimes you put off the headphones and then it's like, Martin, I have a question. And we talked and then we went into the cafe around the corner to actually have
I never did that.
You did.
Literally.
Oh, yes, it happened. Oh, yes, it happened. Or I brought you a little sofa, which you were very excited and happy about because that's exactly what you expected me to get you. You know.
Okay, we will need to beep out the following 5 seconds.
And sometimes Anna, our video producer, just came by with like tons of equipment because she had her desk near ours. I don't think we have desks anymore, right? It's like all is up for grabs when you book to go into the office right now. But we used to have our own desks, and then Anna, our video producer, was nearby, and then she like lugged around all this equipment. I was like, all right, ladies and gents, we're recording a podcast today. And we're like, yeah, we totally knew that. And we totally prepped for it too.
Yeah.
So, you know, office days.
I'm sure we'll just have like bouncy balls all over, and then everyone gets a bouncy ball. No more desks. Ball pits.
Ball pits.
We'll see. Anyway, maybe we should take a break here before we get too far off tangent and figure out what all we're missing. Oh, man. So many things. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Daniel. It was great having you here. Where can folks find you online if they have more questions about Search Console?
They can't. Question? I'm not answering any question. Well, I'm usually on...
No questions.
I'm usually on Twitter, and I read the questions. I'm not as good as you guys answering them, but I'm usually at least reading the questions. And when there is something that, you know, well, we find bugs or, well, not bugs because Search Console does not have bugs, but things behaving in a different way, let's say. So I'm mostly on Twitter. And of course, Search Central YouTube channel. So, woohoo! Well, we all have videos there. I have the Search Console training, which is over for now. We'll see how it goes, but it's over there.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we stay tuned?
Yeah. Stay tuned, Martin.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know. Martin is about to fall from his chair.
No.
It's been fun doing these podcasts, and I hope you, the listener, have been finding them both entertaining and insightful as well. At any rate, let us know how you're liking these and if there are any topics that you think we should be covering in one of the future episodes. And, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Stay tuned.
Yom Tov.